become the equivalent of the students, we act in exactly the same way. It does look really lonely and empty here. I'm wondering if the people behind Dr. Sugri could possibly think that 50 meters away is probably not a point where they're going to get hit by anything too hard. And I'm hoping, on the other hand, for the speakers that they will hit them quite hard. So it's two different approaches. I'm sure people will be joining us as the morning unfolds, and maybe we can help them see that we're moving forward. It's a huge pleasure to be able to introduce two speakers this morning who have been really making a difference within the Southeast Asian landscape, provoking people to move forward, and I'm sure, no doubt, wishing that people would move forward faster. And it would be, and having known of their work and having seen the consequences of the work, I believe they have messages to share not only for Southeast Asia but for the world. To those of you who are up this morning to be here for this session, I'm sure we're in for a complete wonderful treat. Please understand that the session following this is coffee, which is always nice. After that, though, we do have breakout sessions for an hour to take forward points that will be shared this morning and to see how they might resonate in our different communities so that we can see what we might do to respond. The second session is an hour, not 30 minutes as it says in the program. So the second session will run from 11:30 until 12:30. There's a misprint that is a particularly persistent misprint, so it turns up quite often, but it's 11:30 to 12:30, leaving an hour and a half for lunch. I'd like to begin by introducing and welcoming Professor Dr. Mohammed Anis to join us to talk about a title which I think is wonderful but will leave me in a tongue-twisting context: Musicking Indigeneity, Connecting Southeast Asians' Indigenous Soundscapes Across Borders through Music Education. Dr. Anis's background embraces not only music, but even more perhaps dance and across the various arts and across many genres and styles. Please welcome Professor Anis.
I have to take out my watch and make sure I deliver within the given time. First and foremost, sawadee-krap, greetings and good morning to everyone. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, good. The topic of the presentation, as you know, as you can read there, is printed in your program, is something that is very dear to me. Over the 30-some years of my work as an academic and scholar, I began to see there is a huge lacuna in the way we treat music and performance studies education in this part of the world. So I begin with asking several questions in terms of trying to see the connectivity of Southeast Asian soundscape across borders in music education through what I term as musicking indigeneity. The questions are as follows. I ask, am I particularly interested in indigenous soundscape as products of musicking activities in Southeast Asia? And what are the components, if there is, or there are, of indigenous soundscapes, and how they play an important role in creating musicking ingenuity in music education in Southeast Asia? Would border delineation, that is political, right, prevent musicking ingenuity to transcend political and cultural divisions, or on the other hand, could be porous international social, cultural, religious networking. I want this word social, cultural, religious networks outstrip these boundaries. I'm trying to say yes, but how do we deal with it? Because we are living the entities of the political boundaries. Could socio-cultural religious networks as agencies exceed border cloisters, enabling cross-border variations of musicking indigeneity to permeate in Southeast Asian music education? Could we do that? Or would we want to do that? How not to let this platform become another political cliche? And as academics, you know, in every part of the world, we're being told from the top, and we have to learn how to listen from the grassroots. So whether we are going arboreal or we are going rhizomic in music education. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? Could I then suggest that we look at Southeast Asian indigenous soundscapes, big words here, slippery and big, as our pool of resources for musicking indigeneity, rather than copying and pasting from precedents that are non-conventional to Southeast Asia. It's very particular in all of what we do. We subscribe very well to the concept of the associate board examinations and all that, but we have not privilege that is near and dear to us. Hence, could a combination of all the acoustic resources within a given soundscape, ranging from natural to human caused sounds, modified by the indigenous socio-cultural religious environment, afforded the creation or recreation of presentational or representational musical form for musicking indigeneity in music education in Southeast Asia. When I say again socio-cultural religious environment, I want to be very clear here. One of the ways to look at it is into the whole cross-border linguistic grouping. When we look at Austroasiatic grouping and Austronesian grouping, take Austronesian because that's where I'm very familiar. The Austronesian grouping, when they speak of them as being a bunch of serumpun in the word Malay or the under concept of indigeneity, it doesn't have a border. And that sharing experience doesn't have a border. How do we privilege this in music education? I've loaded you with many terms of reference, and I'm going to go here slowly to explain them. First is musicking. I bring this from Code Christopher Small, who has produced a wonderful series of publications. I urge, if you are not familiar, please look at him, look at his stuff. He asserts that music is not a thing, but rather an activity. We all say that sometimes, but do we really mean it or not? It's not a thing, but an activity. It's not really a product, but a process. Musicking, a verb, encompasses all musical activity from composing to performing and to listening to a Walkman that's played back in 1990s, you know, and even to singing in the shower. The fact that we are all there, the fact that we are sharing that experience is musicking. Using Gregory Bateson's philosophy of mind and Goethean thick description of how musical forms a ritual through which all the participants explore and celebrate the relationships that constitute their social identity via music and music making. What I'm trying to say here is, for example, the Hungry Ghost Festival is very big in this part of Southeast Asia, both mainland and island. You have the big event for 1 week in Phuket, in Penang, in Kuala Lumpur, in Medan, and everyone who goes to this event, they may not necessarily be playing music, but they're part of the event and they belong to that event, and that identity, that making of that event depends on everyone present. Now, I would then go on and suggest, therefore, that musicking indigeneity is a product of indigenous soundscapes that are biophonic, which means your collective habitat that you hear, geophonic, sounds of natural elements that inspire you to create what we call now anthropophonic. You create, you make, you create the sound, you organize it, and that are closely associated with the ancestral territories or within the indigenous resources that one has. That's how we create music. We don't create music because we listen from a concert hall. Music in indigeneity in Southeast Asia indulges indigenous soundscape as a component of the acoustic environment found from urban design to wildlife ecology. So even if you're staying in the middle of the city, that soundscape is ever present. And that soundscape shaped us in collectively understanding, identifying, signifying the signs that we want to use. What's the understanding now of indigenous soundscapes? Right. So here's the issue here. I mean, the word is big, but I would say it is a soundscape is a sound or combination of sound that forms or arises from immersive environment, which means the study is on the subject of the acoustic ecology, or sometimes we call it soundscape ecology. Acoustic ecology, sometimes which is called acoustic or soundscape studies, is a discipline studying the relationship mediated through sound between human beings and their environment. So when we organize that sound, we are continuously mediating between what we hear by phonic, geophonic into anthropophonic. Now, the idea of soundscape refers to both the natural acoustic environment consisting of natural sounds, animal vocalization, collective habitat expression, of which is now referred to as biophonic, sounds of other natural elements, which we hear in some highland music, and which is referred to geophonic, and of course what we do as anthropophonic, the set of stuff that we control, we make, we measure. The term soundscape also includes listening's perception of sounds, heard as an environment or as an audio recording or performance of sounds that create the sensation of experiencing a particular acoustic environment. How do you explain the aesthetics of the joy of listening to music? Or composition created using the found sounds of acoustic environment, either exclusively or in conjunction with musical performance. Next is indigeneity. Scientifically, clinically, you can get this from 1972 UN Working Group for Indigenous Peoples, and they amended later because the definition was very hard to be accepted in 1983, and it says, quote, composed of the existing descendants of the peoples who inhabit the present territory of a country, wholly or partially at the time when persons of a different culture of ethnic origin arrived there from other parts of the world, overcome them by conquest, settlement, or other means, reduce them to a non-dominant or colonial condition, who today live more in conformity with their particular social, economic, and cultural customs and traditions than with the institutions of the country in which they are now form part under a state structure which incorporates mainly national, social, and cultural characteristics of other segments of the population which are predominant. How many of us think we are not within this domain? I would like to see that. We all are within this domain. So who are the indigenous? We are. We cannot say the other. We are. But how do we make sense of it? That's the point. Now, in discourses for music in indigeneity, we talk about this a lot in our classes. We tell our kids about the difference of pre-colonial music, temple music, palace music, like we create the word classical music when there's no such notion of classical music first in this part of the world. We had other notions, we never defined them. We think it's easier to put into a very catchy catalog. And that's what happened with us. And then we see now the situation as described in the previous. One, that indigeneity is both autochthonous and allochthonous. I am very, very dedicated to this because I just finished one keynote in Osaka early last year with the ICH, Intangible Cultural Heritage. I fought this out, especially with my government, my company, my state, my government, my people. Because I think the definition of indigeneity, music indigeneity, goes beyond what we define at the political level. Autochthonous means native to the place. Okay, native to the place where it is found. It doesn't mean native to the place that is found. It involves the people who are playing it. Or allochthonous It originates in a place other than where it is found, but it becomes a tradition. For example, I look at Malaysia as a good example. If you're familiar with my country, many traditions that were formerly from Europe, particularly from Portugal, are lost in Portugal, but they become a very strong, powerful presentation and not a representation of the creolized Portuguese Malaysian. And that may not be considered as autochthonous, or that may be not considered as allochthonous. It doesn't fall within the category of the intangible cultural heritage. That's what the state says. Or for example, if you Google, you see Wangkang is a ceremony that is done every year by the Hokkien people from China, where he is no longer available in China. A whole musical procession, like a brass band, going with wonderful composition that kept for generation. It's allochthonous because it came with the migration hundreds of years ago. It is a tradition because it had been practiced hundreds of years ago. But the state doesn't want it as intangible cultural heritage. And it doesn't go into the curriculum, you understand? It doesn't fit while the people are practicing. It doesn't fit because it's not within. So this multi-level negotiation, by stakeholders of indigenous soundscapes. Who are the stakeholders? We are. We are working towards the music in the comunitas, meaning we are doing the presentation. We are not doing a representation. We are not doing representing something that is alien to us, but we want to present something that is organic. But can we do that in our music education? That's a question. I see, I know, like Bernard said, I'm a provocateur, so I provoke you guys, and if I feel very frightened, I go back to 9. But let me go into these two domain world, the Southeast Asian mainland and Southeast Asian insula. I like these two characters. They represent really the tip of the iceberg. In Thailand, everyone should know this, a particular person. Sorry, did I speak further earlier than me? What did I do? I missed a slide. In my excitement, I may have missed a slide. Yes. So we finished indigeneity, we finished discourses in music in indigeneity, and the next slide should be, probably I don't have a slide in front of me, it's crossing borders. It's circumventing convention. So we talk about these socio-cultural religious agencies again. I think you know what I mean now. Either it's a linguistic grouping, whether it's a religious grouping. We have the Buddhist, Christian, Islam, Hindu, indigenous practices. All this has no borders. Why are we putting the border there? And we look at the variants that we find in Southeast Asia. And these variants are not being taught, are not being given knowledge. It dies. So we talk about dying musical tradition. I mean, you're part of it, man. We are part of it. We are not making it alive. We don't talk about acoustic environment of combining this, the idea of biophonic, geophonic, anthropophonic. We only talk of anthropophonic. We train people to do anthropophonic structure, but we do not give them the medium of knowing the local biophonic, geophonic structure. And so I will skip one more slide because I don't have time. I want to go straight into these two characters so that we can finish this within my time. And in Thailand, I say, if you do not know this particular historical figure, then jump into the lake because this is so powerful to me. I'm talking about the link between the West and the East. I'm talking about the indigenous musicking structure and mind and brilliance and genius. I'd like to introduce to you the family of Son Silapat Banleng. Of course, he became the maestro Luang Pradip Pairo. And you read about Luang Pradip Pairo during the period of King Rama VII and all the way to Pribun Songkram. You'll find that he set the tone to create the idea of classical music in education. So outside of the palace, going back to the palace. It's a very interesting intervention. That is okay. If you want to read about him, fantastic. But I want to talk about his son. His son, Prasid. Prasid initially trained as a pianist before studying Western music composition at university in Japan. There is a movie called Overture. If you're familiar, you're not familiar, go and see this movie. It's a fiction, but it's really about the father and son. It's about Son and his son, Prasid. Father was playing Renat virtuosically, and Prasid was playing the piano. There was a beautiful virtuosic intervention. And he then grew up when Thai classical music was at its peak, of course his father, then hitting rock bottom during the 1940s as a result of People's Songkram government. That was what happened, right? And what happened after that, because of the pro-Western policy, Thai classical, Thai music were delegated to being non-mainstream. The turning point came when Prasid was committed to Western music after he met Klaus Pringshem, a student of course, Gustav Mahler in Japan. He brought a group to Japan, he met, and the composer was then teaching at the Gedai University, where then Prasid stayed on and studied in Gedai. He worked as a conductor for the Fine Arts Department when he came back, and composed and had a big hand in the formation of the department's Western music division. So if you look at Sepakon and what the curriculum, that's where his hands has gone to create and move over this. And he produced wonderful symphonic masterpieces like Xiang Tian, Dam Nun Sai, Sai Mi Suite, Chut Noi, and all this. And this is an example of a combination of the geophonic, biphonic, and triphonic structure, which I feel is a classic example of musicking indigeneity. Not just saying I am a conservative revivalist, but I'm saying the presence of all the sonic structure. The other person is from Java, Ni Narto Sabdo. I'm from people from Indonesia. This is another icon. He's a famous composer of Javanese gending. Gending is a specific class of galactomic structure used in gamelan music. And I want to quote in Indonesian before I speak in English what his mind says. He says, quote, Indonesian atau English, next is English. Kreasi baru itu ibarat bakmi yang bukan makanan sehari-hari. Suatu saat kita toh akan kembali makan nasi atau ibarat bistek. Tuhan mencipta sapi, pengolahannya terserah kepada kita. New creations are like noodles, which are not everyday food. Of course, you don't eat noodles every day in Indonesia. One day we'll eat again, with rice again, or sometimes beef steaks. God created the cow, which the meat is used in all this, but it's us who process it. He takes this metaphoric, allegorical structure, and that is present in his musicking indigeneity. Because he grew up as a poor boy in a family whose father is a keris and sarong craft maker named Partinoyo. Had difficult childhood, dropped out of school, had to make a living by helping his family through their artistic talent, so he has a very organic structure coming in his body, biphonic, geophonic, remember that? He had that in his mind. And among other things, became a painter as well as a violinist in the Keroncong Orchestra called Sinar Purnama. The artistic talent grew when Sunarto was able to continue his studies at the Catholic Institute of Education. Normally this happens in a way or other, that missionary schools provide the avenue to connect the West and the East. In 1945, Sunarto became acquainted with the founder of Wayang Orang, which is the classical dance drama, Ngisti Pondo group. And then since then, he began to know the world of puppetry. He knew already something of his Javanese background, but he began to understand the world of puppetry, where in puppetry, musicking gamelan is the highest level of the highest level. And you study Javanese gamelan, it doesn't, you really got to be at that level to understand. And through this, he then was involved in creating productive Javanese songs. And he founded a group, and then he composed, I think it's more than 319 titles, I think more than 319 titles. Of songs or lalagon or gending, such as Chaping Mound and all that. So this man reflects the same thing like the Thai Prasid in the context of their originality and their work, that they are familiar with the Western and whatever they have, and that allows that combination to work. And this has been used, and we have people from the schools here, in the schools of arts. So I would like to go to this level now and say that Sorry, I did not show this to you guys, right? Well, that's okay, you got me. But that's him. So let's go back to the poignant points of reference of the 20th century. I'm not talking 21st century, I'm talking the 20th. We miss entire century, man. We miss an entire century. We are in the 21st, but with a big chasm. What we have. So I've talked about the Western-Eastern connection with the family of Luang Pradeep Pyro through his son, and I would like to say about the Royal University of Fine Arts in Cambodia, which was established in 1917 as École des Arts Cambodienne, and eventually after Khmer Rouge was put back together, trying to put back together, and after that only in 1980, in 1990s and 2000 we see new development. I think Dr. Pin Sofe, are you here? Yeah, speak to him. He will explain to you. He is one of the musicking indigeneity product. Thank you, sir. He's among us. And of course, I talk about Keynote Sabdo, and I talk about the fact that this permeated into the education system in Indonesia, to the ASCII level, to the Sekolah Tinggi School, high school level, and they're trying to stuck with ISB, the other institute that they're stuck with, they're still stuck with ISB, the cultural institute that they're trying to put. But at least they went through an experience of developing what they have at the ground level to produce pieces that are astonishingly wonderful. So Indonesian contemporary musicians really are so unique. They don't copy, they make. And that permeates at the level of education. I'm suggesting this, right? I mean, come on, I'm suggesting this. And in the Philippines, look at the Philippine High School for the Arts. You guys are from Philippines. That was set up in 1978 to now. Located, wonderful. I love to go to Mama Killing in Los Baños. But I do not know whether the hegemonic colonial stems has been eradicated or not. You talk about the Philippines of 300 years being a Spanish colony and 50 years of American colony, but that 50 years made Philippines faster than the 300 years. And then post 50 years, they're asking. And of course, Malaysia has the same syndrome. We have a lot of Malaysians here, we can share that. Singapore is wonderful. Singapore has money and funds. They build so many things. They bring so many people. SOTA, the School of Arts, LaSalle, NAFA, Yong Siu To, where Bernard is. I mean, you have people being given 100% scholarship, coming from other parts of the world, and they don't remain. When they finish, they go back somewhere else. What is the question, therefore? What is happening? I mean, you have space, you have events, you have internationalization, but how far are we developing indigenous musicking? And let me recap, therefore, here. I think I would go back to the adage that I normally use in all I speak of. In the Austronesian world, we call it too, in Tagalog as well, alam takambang menjadi guru, or in Tagalog, ang mundo ang iyong guro, which means that the world is your oysters. It is biphonic, it's geophonic, it's anthropophonic. The listener's perception of sounds heard as an environment that creates the sensation of experiencing and creating musical performance are twice behaved behavior. Twice behaved is a wonderful concept that Victor Turner and Schachtner combined together in critical theory, where you are behaving twice as you learn it, you come up and you perform on stage, you are not you anymore. How do we bring this to our kids to understand? Do not be frightened by facing the fourth wall, because you are not you anymore. The green room was made for you to be not you. And that is why we learned. But what do we do? How do we manifest it? So I would say that we have to include autochthons, we have to include alloctonists. We cannot say this is not Malaysian traditional, for example. I fight tooth and nail. Oh, no, this is from India. This is Carnatic music. I said, for heaven's sake, we have certain things we recognize which was invented 50 years ago, and that is a tradition that has been there ever since Indigenization happened in the world of Southeast Asia. So I would say we have to connect by connecting the indigenous soundscape without worrying about the borders that we create. Thank you very much. Keep it first and you break it later, okay? Thank you.
And now it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Kit Young. Her extraordinary work across many communities and many continents is well documented in her biography. I won't go into all of those details, but I think what we have in both speakers here this morning are unique identities, unique borderless identities between genres, between styles, between disciplines, and they both serve as examples to us of what might be possible in our contemporary world. I welcome Dr. Kit for her insights into listening with a borderless mind. Thank you. Please welcome.
While we work on the change of the PowerPoints, I want to thank Professor Lasky and Dr. Sukri very much for inviting me to speak at CDOM. And I'm extremely honored. And I'm so glad to see old friends and make new ones here, colleagues. And I want to particularly express my thanks to our colleagues from Myanmar who are here and thank them for coming to join. And I'm so appreciative of it's great, their involvement in CDOM. So I think I need some help changing the PowerPoint. How many times do we see pictures of the Earth with America and South America and Europe? And it's not so frequent that we see pictures of the Earth with Asia, particularly Southeast Asia, right? So I'm going to ask your indulgence. I would like you to experiment with me in an experiment that's going to run through this whole talk. So I would like you to listen to a tune, and then we're going to listen to it again, and I'd like you to close your eyes and start humming along with the tune. So I'll play it first, then I'll play it second, and then start humming as soon as you feel comfortable. Okay, let's close our eyes, and I will too. And if you can, just start humming along with what you hear. Keep humming. Great, let's do it one more time. can, if you have a neighbor next to you, could you just exchange for a little minute just your thoughts about how you enter this tune by listening and by humming? Just take 30 seconds. Talk to your neighbor and just an observation or two. So I wish I could hear everybody. Maybe I'll go around afterwards and ask what you said. Okay, we're going to listen to it again. But guess what? It's going to be transliterated, so you'll be able to read the words. And the singer's voice is going to be coming to you through notation as well as through sound. Let's sing louder. Let's do it one more time, okay? Let's sing with the singer. Here we go. So this piece is by my former student, Lapai Azet, who's Kachin, and it's in Jingpo, her language, and she composed it as a lullaby for her first child. So you see the English, the translation of the Jingpo. So I want you to hold that in your mind. Talk to your neighbors again. I want you just, whoever you talked to before or someone new, and compare a little bit how you heard the tune without the props, and how you heard the tune and sang the tune by either reading the words or both reading the words and reading the music. Just take a minute. So I think we've got lots of ideas that have just come out that you guys can talk about, in the breakout sessions from this. I was hoping that would stimulate some real things to talk about. So keep that in your ear. We're going to come back to it now that you know it, and we're going to move on. I think what I'd like to do is, the way I'm going to talk is, we have how are we going to do that? On your phone somewhere, there's this text of what I'm saying. It's not going to be on the PowerPoint up there.
I think it's in Google Drive, or Google Doc, something. Yeah.
It's in Google Docs under, if you take out your phones and
the
get.
URL is in front. I don't remember it.
So does anyone have that information? It's in Google Docs, but under CDOM or?
Do you want me to?
Kunyui knows. Kunyui put it in there. yesterday. And that's just for people who, if I talk too fast or if you're, you have the text in front of you. But mostly this talk is going to be like a musical composition. So it moves in odd ways with odd rhythms. This is the Voyager spacecraft. And there's something on Voyager spacecraft number 1 and 2 that is called the Golden Record. So it was launched in 1977, and it passed Pluto in 2012, and both Voyagers are now in interstellar space. And the Golden Record is a combination of sounds, images, movements, information about humanity and our natural world. And they're greetings to aliens in the universe in these languages from Southeast Asia, Nanyang, or lands beneath the winds. Thai, Vietnamese, Indonesian, Hokkien, Arabic, Burmese, Bengali, English, and Cantonese. But guess what? There's no music from this part of the world on that Golden Record. So the music that Carl Sagan chose in 1977, you can go into Wikipedia and see the list, is very telling. So that lapse is symbolic, to me at least, of a large wound, very big wound now, very wide and very deep, that actually the Museum of Southeast Asian Music, where we were yesterday at Mahidol, can start to heal through design of new programs, celebrating and creating community in the performing arts from cultures that we all know in peninsular and archipelago Southeast Asia. And it's also a lapse that each one of us in CDOM can seek to change by empowering local realities. So we learn in grade school that borders define territories, cities, countries, and that borders belong to governments. And wars are fought to extend them or take them away. But who is responsible for setting borders in our musical minds? Institutions, culturally inherited but unexamined habits, engines of commerce and education, identities determined by nations, preferences molded by the media. And who's responsible for dissolving these borders? Isn't it each one of us? In the 21st century, doesn't this deep and difficult task of dissolving our inner borders when encountering expressions of beauty in other musical modalities fiercely demand our respect as we honor the earth and broaden our magical and personal listening inner sanctum? Isn't this interior work of empathy the most fundamental challenge to our lives as musicians, as humans, as earthlings? We're born alert, and we can either choose listening, compassion, or not. Why not engage creatively and suspend habits of inherited defining, naming, neglecting, and avoiding in order to directly experience and commune with our ears in empathy, a musical empathy where there is only here, no there. So currently in the United States, the African American Black Lives Matter consciousness-raising movement uses the term stay woke. This means keeping everyone aware of white privilege and entitlement in American society, where Euro-American cultural values maintain power and are seen as superior to all others. Not knowing one is asleep is the call of stay woke. The assumption by many white Americans, and I am one, that their outlook is neutral, the world's status quo, that they are unethnic, the norm, the definers, the shapers of everyone's aspirations, is what the Black Lives Matter movement addresses. Similarly, but not confined to America or race, is a stay woke parallel with the Western Euro-African American sonic family, jazz, classical, and pop, and its ubiquity, the fact that it's everywhere. A commonly unexamined assumption among a majority of listeners around the world is that the Western music family absorbs other music into its frameworks and maintains an implicit, embedded superiority over the varieties of musical traditions that we just heard about from Anis in indigeneity, and voices equally disposed to sing for the earth in their own way. Complicit in this assumption are those in Southeast Asia and elsewhere who would rather join the superfamily than embrace local voices, the outliers, voices who sing tunes of poetic insight or artistic brilliance unheard by the majority. Especially so among modernists valuing status, who say that the music superfamily is international. It's better organized. It has more developed public relations platforms. It's more complex, it's more successful, more evolved, artistically deeper, harmonically and rhythmically richer, emotionally more fulfilling, better systematic pedagogy, has conservation through notation, can accomplish fusion more successfully, is a common historical heritage and language of compositional techniques and structures, etc., etc., etc. It is so busy hearing itself, praising itself, it barely takes notice of the outlier families who whisper their songs in very distant or ancient ways. Even in 2018, despite many exceptions, the superfamily and its cousins, dominant music cultures, are snoring in their sleep and hardly stay woke as younger generations of musicians join the International Family Club, thirsting for fame and competition. Unheard in their local or distant midst are radiant outlier musical expressions with unfamiliar or complex grammars that fade into quaintness, appropriation, fleeting reference, generality, or momentary regard of the exotic. Unfortunately, in our world, unfamiliarity breeds contempt. Outlier, unself-conscious efforts to incorporate Western practice into local idioms are heard and judged by their superfamily as imitation and unauthentic. But these encounters and folding in of the foreign from any direction have delighted musicians for centuries, arising from, in our case, the Southern Silk Road caravans, the musical ports of call, as in the merging of spoken languages that morph, change, develop, and become something else. Contemporary paths of fusion, when imagined with sensitivity, is a time-honored practice. So, I invite you to try some exercises in stay woke thinking. So I'll throw some things out at you. Okay, here's the first one. UNESCO has $1 billion. They have $1 billion budget to hire master musicians from heritages of music cultures to advise conservatories and music departments all over the world on how to organize integrative music studies. These musicians are paid international consultant fees, and they reorganize the curricula in schools like Shanghai Conservatory and the Juilliard School of Music. Here's another one. Exchange programs in the performing arts between Southeast Asian universities and African and Middle Eastern countries outnumber those in Australia, Europe, Japan, Korea, South America, and the United States. Another one. Music departments no longer separate their studies into Thai music and music, or Korean music and music. All undergraduate music majors are required over their 4 years to perform recitals of music from 5 or more cultures, according to that culture's transmission modality. No shortcuts. Music faculties are no longer segmented by genre. All integrate their gifts and develop their learning as they teach. In Myanmar language, the same word is used for learning and for teaching. The last one. It's 2020. All new international app advertisements include Zapin drum beats, or the Dambao, or Kulintang, or Suling, or Saiwang, or Molam, sung in English with Isan inflection, or Bipat ensemble playing Homrong. GPS gives directions in all languages and dialects in Southeast Asia, including minorities that straddle geographic borders into China, India, northeast of India, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you get the idea. Although these scenarios are highly unlikely, they encourage us to think different. And here is the moment when I must stress that I am not suggesting replacing the superfamily. Rather, proposing to the extent that we are able, the creation of equal ear space for legacies of artistic expressions, and observing very carefully how our minds process what we hear. So, okay, I woke up yesterday, or I have jet lag, so yesterday morning and this morning, I was out listening outside to the birds. I was listening to the chorus of birds on the Mahidol campus, and the loudest bird is the koel bird. In Thai, it's the nokawao. And you know this bird. We're hearing it all the time while we're here at this conference, like kawao, 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 right? So I thought about that, and as I listened and I recorded with my phone, like 10 minutes of listening, oh my God, I was paying attention to the kawao bird, right? To the koel bird. And I was ignoring this amazing, 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 from everywhere, a source of bird song and crickets and all sorts of things. But the point is, I was selecting out on purpose a particular sound and blurring everything else. So that's my work. I need to learn how to dissolve that in my own perception. Okay, I think he has a version that I didn't send. So there's this amazing word, ensoulment. The British composer John Foulds, who died in Calcutta in 1938, called communion with all music ensoulment. He observed how in Indian singing a single tone was a universe of change and fluctuation as the singer arrives and departs, as juxtaposed to Western practice, where the notated orchestral score is a fixed artifact, separate from performance, a multivalenced array of ordered tones and time created by an individual, the composer. Ensoulment beats in the heart of each on a continuum. We must become adept at embracing and entering different ear ecologies of both receiving the singer and of learning the song. In our time, the one does not have to exclude the other. However, when we impose our native expectations on the singer and the song, we lose our path to ensoulment. Choosing engaged openness over biased indifference, receiving singer and song in their way, inspires community everywhere. So in Latin, the word tradition, it's interesting. It's a combination of the word of trad, or trade, meaning across, and the word dare, a verb, I know it's a noun, gift, or to make a gift. Across generations, across cultures, across permanence, across neglect, across musics, a gift. All too frequently, those who have the deepest gifts, the quiet voices, they lack power and access to the noisy buzz. In the most grim of scenarios, and I've seen this myself, sadly, respect for their gifts is too little or too late. Their circle of admirers thins with each succeeding generation. These musicians denigrate their own marvelous orality, apologizing that they don't read music or that their music isn't of international standard, a legacy of cosmopolitan, formerly colonial denigration. These musicians frequently lose exposure through patrons who've died, or official associations who sometimes ignore them, favoring more modern genres, or they're just too remote for ongoing contact. But there's good news, as all of you know. Thankfully, each time a visitor or student or family member uploads a video on Facebook or YouTube of a practitioner of an intangible heritage, each time a city, a school, or a religious group organizes a performance for them and honors their art, engagement with a living archive becomes possible. Acknowledging our tendency to avoid extended encounter remains our greatest challenge, including those performing artists as equal players instead of adjuncts in arenas of power demands our advocacy. Boredom. So boredom in general fascinates me. I think it's become quite a popular thing. In Europe, there are all sorts of conferences based on about boredom, what it means to be bored. So why people get bored of certain music is more complicated than one would suppose and the subject of many academic studies. If different musics were approached not like a dinner buffet, but as an altar of contemplation, could a listener overcome their boredom? I have friends who refuse to listen to certain cultural musics because they say the monotony makes them nauseous, makes them want to throw up. I also have friends who describe Western symphonic music as a huge, messy roar. Not unlike a foreign food, but what if, like food, the music is served in smaller portions, like settings where the listener attends, readjusts their disappointments, and stops to reflect, returning to the music, listening in new ways, without expectation. So nurtured by further exposure to the music in this way of settling in. So dissolving boredom is also a property of Stay Woke. So now, we're going to go back to Yup Yup Law. And we're going to listen to Azit's lullaby again. And then we're going to sing it by ourselves. So listen well. So you have the words in front of you. Shall we sing?
You mean I'm not loud enough already? Okay. With regard to the song, I noticed some things about the notation. And of course, notation can also be an act of rank colonialism, if you're not careful. My colleague from Vietnam here noticed, for instance, that it's pentatonic with the absence of the second and sixth scale degrees, or A and E. But I noticed an E flat in the key signature, and I noticed chords with a C, presumably major chord notated at the end. And my question was, is that something the singer had in mind, or is that something that we Westerners overlaid on it?
Steve, thank you. So that's really fascinating. Because Azit is married to an American band conductor, and she learned some of her notation skills from actually Umo Nang, who's sitting here, who is also her teacher, and other skills from Mike, and they're now at an international school in Korea. So Isn't that fascinating? That was one of the things I was hoping you would find. So that the notation is a separate reality. It's a reality that Azet would like to present. She did it. Mike didn't do it for her. She did it. And she just sent this to me. And so it's not my turf to correct it or anything. I didn't want to do a transcription. It was her effort, in other words. So that's part of what we're talking about. And this, of course, goes through musicology for generations, but, you know, is the artifact, the music, is the artifact what we hear, is what we see on the score exactly representing what we hear, and that's a conversation that can take a year without break. But thank you for raising that.
That's really valuable to know, because I find in a lot of what's going on here a very careful balancing act. On the one hand, Westerners can take traditional folk music and in the old-fashioned, modernist fashion, create the true version of a folk tune versus all of the defective ones. We've seen that tradition from the early 20th century. And on the other hand, if people in their own cultures are using Western notation to write down something, we can also say that they are appropriating something from the dominant culture. In other words, is it an act of colonialism from the oppressor culture, or is it an act of appropriation by the minority culture taking what it finds valuable from the dominant culture?
In so many cultures that have had to conform to the Christian church, starting Sangamano, you know, Portuguese, early Catholic Mass, and representations of the Mass, representations of hymns in Myanmar among the Karen, Kachin, and so many Chin groups, more on the Protestant side, the Baptist side of things. Their singing becomes what they see, and that becomes the reality. There are other realities where a song like this has so much inflection that cannot be notated, right? Did you notice that how she holds on to the very last whole note? It's more than a whole note. And it's so steady, and it has its own world. So things like that, are they appropriation? Is there one side? I think that's for all of us to maybe not judge, just sort of, this is where we are. We share. We take, we give, we, you know, assume. And I suppose what I'm trying to suggest today is that we create energies. We create a synergy of possibility. Whether it's Western, whether it's Asian, whether it's this, whether it's that. Maybe that's not the question we should ask anymore. But what are we singing? And how are we listening? And how can we listen more and more empathetically? Anyone else?
Sorry, my question is, I would like to know a girl or woman composed this song or folk song first, and why she know the modality system and tonality system is different. My question. And regarding to the writing, notated more exactly as really she sing, I think we have the way how to copy, how to transcribe. We can build a symbolic system regarding to the glissando or long note, many others. Because I have experience to do this with the very ancient religious chanting in Khmer religious chanting. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And so many of you have friends who've tackled new ways of transcribing, right? So new symbols. Ed Herbst in Bali with the Balinese voices, you know, he has 3 lines, and then there's always a descent and a rise to capture the glissando and the travel of the voice. So, yeah, she was using her tools. She was just using the tools that were available to her at that time.
Thanks, Kit. Thank you. Actually, I was really interested in listening to the birds this morning, because I think in a way it links back to Professor Anis's point that there is this wide environment with all the voices, and we will often, as you said, take us into one voice. One of the things that I think is a challenge for us across a region is that each voice may also wish to be the most heard. So how do we build a concept even within our region of hearing the entire bird song rather than thinking that a particular voice needs to be heard? And of course the birds maybe don't connect with each other in quite the same way, but over time new forms of song could emerge. So it's a thought of how do we help ourselves before we become a bigger world. How do we become a region of song? And if we could answer that before morning tea, that would be brilliant. But thank you for the inspiration of that. But that's its thoughts, just to... Please. Yes. Well, thank you very, very much for two wonderfully combined presentations looking at very broad worlds and very big topics from different but mutually helpful perspectives. Thank you for your work in not only preparing apart, but also in working together to make this session meaningful. I think perhaps when we do our conversations, if you're able to float between the communities, that would be incredibly helpful, so that we can perhaps have further dialogues in smaller groups. We did want, in appreciation and acknowledgement, to offer a small gift of memory for this morning's event. So please, do join us, and thank you. Thank you very much. Please, a warm word. Welcome.
The next session is coffee. We'll be in the foyer for having our coffee break. After the coffee break, we'll be separating into groups. And actually, we're going to be separated for the next 3 sessions going forward. At 11:30, all of you, when you registered, received this little sticker here, this little tab that asks you to join a Keynote group discussion. This is our way of trying to get as many people into different rooms as possible, and we have 7 rooms set up. So try to follow your group number, and then at 11:30, after coffee, please make your way. We're going to be going to Building A, which is the big building this direction. On the 2nd floor, there are all of these classrooms. There's 7 of them, and we're going to be breaking up into the classroom that go to the room that's on your ticket. After the 1-hour keynote discussion, and each room, I should say, will have a discussion moderator, someone to help ask questions and lead the conversation. At 12:30, we'll be going to lunch. Lunch is in the Building D. So from building A, you're going to be walking all of this direction across the bridge to where our large koi pond is. And we're going to be having a buffet lunch around the koi pond. Lunches from 12:30 until 2 o'clock. At 2 o'clock, we'll be breaking into our theme breakout sessions number 2. They're in different rooms throughout these buildings. Check the theme that you're interested in carefully. If you're not sure where that room is, please ask a staff member. All of our rooms have a building letter before them, A, B, C, D. So building A is the big building. This is building B. I don't think anything's in building C, the library, and then building D, which is where we're having lunch. So check your rooms carefully and join for your theme session that you're interested in from 2 until 3:15. At 3:15, we're having a break again in the foyer, coffee break, coffees and snacks. And then 3:45, we're going to be moving into our country meetings. Our country meetings are assigned what country you're in. Please join. It's your chance to talk with your colleagues and folks about goings-on in your country. These country meetings have proved important in the past because we've actually gotten momentum to create some of the country associations that have come out of that in Malaysia and in Thailand, for instance. So those are all in your program book. Finally, at 4:30 today is our business meeting, the General Assembly. This is our requirement for being an association, is to have our annual business meeting where we report to the members about the financials and the membership and things like that. It is something we try to get through as quickly as possible because not really anyone enjoys business meetings. But we are all, of course, welcome. If we do vote on anything, the only active members who are the designated representative from their institution are actually voting members for decisions like that. There is a dinner at 5:30 available in Building D. And then the evening is, of course, yours. If you are interested in going to the orchestral concert, the TPO concert, you are welcome. It's at 7 o'clock. We just ask that you sign up so we know how many people would be interested in going, and we can prepare a ticket for you. Otherwise, that is our day, and then it should be a productive day, but we're actually going into a lot of small group sessions. So make sure you keep to your schedule and know where you're going so that we can keep on time. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Just to clarify, you'll see that all the sessions that are breakouts today are either in this room or in Building A, so it should be quite easy to find the different spaces. It's obviously helpful that we have as many people as possible in those different communities. So the thought is obviously you don't go back to the same theme area as yesterday, and you'll see that there's only 4 sessions this afternoon. So it should mean we can get slightly larger groups going in within each one. Are there any questions about any of the organization of the rest of today, or also just can I confirm that we start tomorrow at 9 a.m.? I am right on that, aren't I? Okay. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you very much. So see you at 11:30 in 7 different spaces. If we end up with the rooms too small, after you go to the relevant room, please, because if we want to combine rooms, we can do it from there. So, and we'll have an hour for discussion. Thank you.